I found a letter from my stalker by Minister of Owls. I found this note nailed to a tree on my front lawn. I really don't know how to describe it. I'll just let you read it yourself. I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me. You hardly do these days. Your skin looks so nice and healthy, and your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen them. You've grown so much. I remember how different you used to look when you were younger. I remember the day I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting at my desk, head down, listening to the teacher rattle off some names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognize, and the stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student? The teacher didn't pause for a second, just continued calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice had come from. I saw you, a pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at the seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies flying around you, flickering, dozens of them, never straying far from you. And then I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin, like you were mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost? No one else seemed to acknowledge the new stranger sitting in the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour, I passed and I waited for something to happen, for someone to notice you, for you to leave, for you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like in a horror movie story. I was certain I was in, but nothing happened. Teachers came and went, my classmates laughed and slept. You just sat there. The bell rang for recess, and the other kids ran to their mundanities for the day, leaving me with you together in the empty classroom. You stood up and pulled the chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your questions. I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. Probably what should have been turned out better for me in the long run, but let's not speculate. I guess at that point in my life I was pretty bloody lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd eat me and the other 50 was someone wanted to talk with me. Kid priorities don't really make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk and sat down with the chair you pulled for me and asked my question. What are you? Or what were you? You told me you didn't know. You said that once you were a child, just like me, with parents and friends. You used to go to the same schools as me. Then one day, one ordinary day, when you were 10, you just woke up and you were like this, covered in fireflies and no one could remember you. The moment they concentrated on anything else, no one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd notice you every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years, about how I'd forget the instant I'd walk out of the room, how everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you'd been alone. Your story was very hard to believe, so I didn't. I asked what really prank show I was on, what reality prank show I was on. You looked, well, unimpressed. You asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard by the non sequitur. You said last time I was here, I was telling you a story, a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps prickled my skin. It was a story I'd been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone yet. At that moment, a million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously, adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you, so I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask if my mother had recovered from her sickness yet. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed of the fact that I had shared this private matter to a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go, your steadiness took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate, like you had already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid, but I was probably on the onset of a crush. So you can just excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors, pressed it against my arm's skin, and dug in as it drew blood. I pushed it forward until the cut formed the shape I wanted. Letter by letter, I carved your name into my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong, kid power might have made me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But even then, as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that, the confusion, how strange it was for you that anyone would want to remember. I remember that look so clearly, and when I woke up the next day and saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said no one had ever done anything like that before and suggested I might have a mental illness. I won't deny it. That drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came to my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember? That night, I was sitting up in my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should ever cover it up so that I couldn't see it and give you back your privacy, when I heard a crash. I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered with a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out of the window crack and see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice, you made it look quite rusty. That was all right. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You'd tell me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed that food had gone missing, never noticed the extra room, or that you'd stolen the extra keys. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think that you were part of my imagination, Fight Club style. After all, you could do to me that I couldn't do to myself. You spent the next month or so trying to leave bite marks in my ear or neck to prove a point, but I still have a few scars on my ears, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get even worse and worse, paler and paler. You rubbed your eyes raw, and in the winter we'd had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and started researching for clothes to wear. It was winter morning and my room was dark, so I didn't see your name on my arm. A cold shiver went through my body and pulled out a long-sleeved jacket. A small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah, and why did I? That was annoying. I finished tidying up and headed to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I had been worrying about had just disappeared. I walked up to the school stairs, down the hall through my classroom door, and sat at my desk. The same feeling of burdened, forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I just sat at my desk until my classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out and to join them when I heard it. It was something small, like in the wind, like a whisper, but it came over and over, insistent. It sounded my name, but I knew this was strange, that was worth my attention. But I felt oddly calm. Everything would be all right. Everything would be fine. Just ignore it. I sat there at my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices. When I felt a force tugging me on my sleeve, the moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open. I saw your name on my arm, and then your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You had been yelling at me for over 20 minutes. I think that was the moment we realized how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from complete erasure. We spent most of the next year in the town library together trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me because of my mother's treatments. My family couldn't afford to go on any trips, and our house didn't have heating anymore, so I was happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in and of itself. After all, how could I read about people I couldn't remember, and how would you find out who was special when no one else could remember enough about them to record them? We found our old family trees and records individually. We'd write down the name of everyone in the book on two lists. Then we would compare. The names I hadn't remembered to write down but you had would become the focus. They were the names of those who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books we thought we could help us because they were written by or were about the people we were searching for. I read the books with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You scoured the internet on the library computers on the lookout for articles about the people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse of what we got was really happening to you. It was late at night when you found the picture. I was a bit drowsy at the time, but I about half a nod when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up, pointing at the screen. I didn't see anything, well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing hanging somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you had marked two names. Susie Appleby Reagan, 13. Terry Appleby Reagan, 12. Siblings. For a moment I saw the paper on the screen side by side. Side by side. And then I saw them. Two figures emerging from the woods towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, with the exception of their limbs that stretched to nightmarish proportions. Their blank white skin was that of pure albino and looked more like the tree bark than anything you would expect to find on a mammal. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. A shorter one looked emaciated. I could see their rib cages around their eyes, so small, so red. The taller one with its white hair didn't even look alive anymore, and they were more like their skin wrapped around a skeleton. Fireflies swarmed out of the pair's empty eye sockets, both reaching for their cameraman. For a moment, I looked at the article surrounding the picture. It was a blog posted by a hiker, 20 years after the last mention of the two kids. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He had been wanting to go to the woods to get to the woods pictured for a while now, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture had just appeared on his camera one day, out of the blue. For a moment I looked at your face, your thin, pale face with the red veined eyes. Would that be you when my scar faded? Just walking horror I'd glimpse, then forget? We worked through our reading list at a much faster pace starting that moment. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we'd left untouched promised hope. The books that we finished tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods as one's future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list just before I stumbled across the journal. Oh God, that horrible, horrible journal. The journal used to belong to a mental patient named Joey who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until his flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre, disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favorites were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone else. But I think like this belong in the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. In the end, it's sufficient to know that these things were not fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, anyone he pleased, and he would take them at any time in the dead of night from their own homes, or in broad daylight from their front yards. It doesn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house, drag them inside. Usually an Amber Alert came up at that point, but he didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon. He'd drag them to a special room in his house. Here the fireflies would come and latch onto them. Now nobody was searching for the kids, not the police, not the parents, nobody. From then on, he could do whatever he wanted, and he got bored of them after a day or two, after the child had broken. At that point, he disposed of them, hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with bugs. One day, I guess he got bored of that too, so he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not on account of guilt, no. He just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. Sick bastard. Oh no, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing them. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host. Just in a dormant state, when a child, he specified the age, would approach the swarm, he would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into the things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say that the world owed him nothing, but that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out. On the final page, there was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face, because at that moment you asked if I had found anything. I said no and closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down the computer, you picked up the last book, and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was all right. I could go home and we'd talk about it in the morning. I stood up and walked past the shelves of books, headed for the library entrance. I stopped right outside the door and waited. I waited till I heard sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table. You were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands, and I sat back down. You raised your eyes to me. You said you wished you had never met me, and how happy you were when you had nothing to lose, and how I ruined your life. You had never really gotten better at talking to people. That was just the worst love confession I've ever heard. I remember how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember it. I wish it could have just been that. I'm sorry I ruined your moment. When my arms were around you, I thought it was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the firefly in my hand. I remember how it struggled until it didn't, until it was a part of me. The fireflies shifted, they came over to me and left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes, the confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to know that. I wasn't really living anyway. You reached for me. I pulled away, as the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes. And then you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now, so many people at your birthday party. You look so much healthier. I hadn't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten a lot paler. My eyes hurt all the time now. I couldn't go to school like you did all those years. I hadn't wasted my time, though. I found Joey's pit. The bodies, there were so many bodies. It's a grave for those children now. Without me, my mom could afford her surgery. She looked so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you crying yesterday. You were with your friends laughing, and for a brief moment your eyes met mine, and they were so wet. I think I'm going away, for good, I think. You're not going to be happy if I stick around. I'm so happy I met you, even if you don't remember me. Note end. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes and feel so lonely even with my friends. I don't know what's going through my head hurting these times. Sometimes I end up in the bathtub, and now it wasn't. They're letters. That one got a little bit dark. Wow. I was not expecting that one, actually, when I was reading it a little bit. Uh, I found a letter from my stalker by Minister of Owls. It's a little bit triggering for some people, I would admit. I'm sorry if it is. Um, but yeah, there is some things that people need to really consider. But thank you guys for listening, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.